the former Finance Minister, Kennedy Agyapong, Kweku Anofori Atta, appeared before the courts. And that what you're seeing is the virtual hearing. And that's what's on the screen now. You see him seated in the jumpsuit, which is the dark blue jumpsuit. It's actually the color code for the least risky detainees. So he's part of the least in terms of the levels of risk of detainees. What happened in court after we, the public, who were observing this online, were asked to leave was that this case has been adjourned to April 27. April 27. That is the immigration case against him by the ICE. And also the bond application has been adjourned, that hearing to February 19. February 19. That is the development, because the trial judge asked for the evidence of the extradition request by the government of Ghana. The Department of Justice, we understand, will make that available. And this is an issue that has, even though was being held in the United States, has huge Ghanaian interest. In fact, at some point, the number of Ghanaians I could count on this virtual hearing, quite a lot of them, and until we were let go, because Ken Ofori Atta's lawyers requested for a private hearing, which was granted by the trial judge, by the way, as of right of the detainee. Now, February 19, April 27, those are the two dates to have in mind. Now, Matipebo, I started with you at this point because of the consistent point you keep making about what you see as a difficulty in the process of getting Ken Ofori Atta back. You say his investment in the United States might make it difficult to get him extradited to Ghana anytime soon. Why is that?
Yeah, so I made a point that, yes, investment. The U.S. thrives on a lot of foreign investment, a lot of foreign debt. You check their economy, they're always thriving on foreign debt, right? That's why I made a point that the Japanese, Canadians, the Saudis, etc., have billions and billions. Even for the Saudis, it's in trillions in the U.S., right? So you see why, when you look at U.S.-Saudi relations, you see how, even though they had, the Americans, the previous Biden regime had issues with the Jamal Khashoggi, this assassination. You see that Trump, because he's very transactional, in no time, he quickly cozied up to the MBS, the Saudi Crown Prince, and now they are in good business. He says, so the Saudis are not even responsible for the death of Khashoggi, right? So that is the plain truth. The American economy invites a lot of foreign investors. And so it comes with some protection. Now, with the way Ofori Atta is invested in there, you see that one of his lawyers, John Ashcroft, Ashcroft is a lobbyist as well. He's a lobbyist. And what we say in America, the lobbyists, they are the people who go around, okay, midnight, influencing government policies, etc., getting things done. They fix issues for you, they fix matters. So, and with that choice, John Ashcroft, who was former Attorney General from 2001 to 2005, that's a colossus. So it tells you that there will be a lot of power play. This thing is not a joke. There will be a lot of power play. So that's why I'm saying that looking at everything, if we are judging by what is on paper, it's a very complex fight. Very complex. And you see now, the next hearing is in what? April. Is that also?
Yeah, that's for the
bail. And that's
the bail is February 19th.
19th, oh sorry.
Yeah, but
and then
the April is for the substantive case of the immigration.
Yes, so you see that the trial will go on, and we all know that even under the extradition side has come on, it even makes it more complex. You know that extradition takes more time. So we are analyzing that if we look at what is on paper, which is that Ofori Atta has millions of investments in the U.S., then it complicates the fight. It complicates the fight. It's not just, an ordinary John Doe that you just catch and then throw out. No. And look at the pedigree of the lawyers. It doesn't come cheap. That's a lot of money. John Ashcroft, Google, you are talking about millions of dollars in legal fees alone. Millions of dollars in legal fees alone. And he didn't just take one lawyer. Then he took the Afghanistan man too. The Kashimi. Kashimi is also alleged to have fled from Afghanistan. He fled from accountability. You see?
Well,
he was. Yeah. Or you Google, you see aviation minister.
But if you talk about the millions of investment, there was a question when you made this point. One that wanted to find out exactly what investments Ofori Atta has in the United States. If you say millions, what do you know?
Oh, so some are in stocks, bonds, U.S. Treasury bonds, stocks, etc. Then private investments as well. It's no secret. Okay, so both public and private.
I see.
Both public and private. And now that he has the lobbies in there, as I say, when you see lobbies brought in there, Charlie, this fight is far more complex than.
So this investment you're talking about is one that can be publicly verified. You picked some information you are looking into. I just want to find out because these questions I keep getting that you keep referencing Ofori Atta's millions of investment in the United States. It's going to make it difficult for him to be extradited.
Oh, yes. Oh, but it's even, those actions, once again, you remember those actions. At the point that I said his son had applied for permanent residence for him, this is the same way they came. How? I should show my source. Thankfully, in 2 months, it came out that his own lawyers had admitted. In the same manner, when it comes to the investment, be patient. Be patient. You heard the phrase the Attorney General used. He said the other investigations he's doing, okay, they are mind-blowing. You know, Dr. Ayuni is very moderate, okay? He's not giving away to flamboyant words and swag easily like that. So for Ayuni to tell you that the other investigations against Ofori Atta, when they come out public, they would blow you away. Please be patient. Be patient. So let me use the publicly available information. That's what I'm using to, answer you. And then let's go back for the avoidance of. I say Google and see John Ashcroft's pedigree. You know what it takes to retain John Ashcroft as a lawyer? You are running into millions of dollars. What are you saying? Even the lawyer alone, you're already running into millions of dollars.
Right.
So you see, then let's come to this part, just in case I don't get the opportunity to answer. Look, I think, you see, we've heard, last week we were here, Kofi Benton, my good friend and my lawyer, is not here. Last week I didn't get to answer, and I've seen it on other platforms. Please, this Ofori Atta return, apart from us saying Akufo Addo and the MPP must come in and bring him down immediately, there is also a separate constitutional argument that he has a constitutional duty to come back to Ghana. It's a constitutional duty. As long as he remains Ghanaian, he has a duty. Because, look, Article 12 of the Constitution says that natural persons must also obey the Constitution. We should respect it. Honorable Dafia Meko sits here, Dr. Zato sits here. We are all citizens. We must respect the Constitution. So if Article 12 says, just the instructive part, it says the fundamental human rights and freedoms enshrined in this chapter shall be respected and upheld by the executive, blah, blah, blah. And then by natural and legal persons. Right. Ofori Atta is a natural Ghanaian. That's a natural human being, right? And what is the point? When you go to 19.3 says that the trial of an accused person shall take place in his presence. So that is where his duty. We are not saying come and confess to the Office of Special Prosecutor, etc. Of course, if it does, that's bonanza. But I'm talking about the trial. He must be physically present. It's a duty. in the Constitution. It says that it shall take place in its presence. It's not an option. So those who are saying that it doesn't have the duty to come, you know, if it was optional, then what is the essence of the laws on extradition?
Right.
What is the essence? Then why do we have laws on extradition? If you run away, we will use the law to pull you. So this constitutional duty to attend, be physically present, please, is distinct, is separate from saying that, oh, we need him to help investigations. No, that's the one that he doesn't have the duty to help. It is the state that says he's committed some offenses, so the state must go ahead and prove it by itself, right? He doesn't have to help you, but he must make himself physically available. He must come to court. When he enters the court, because of our laws against self-incrimination, when you ask him a question and he thinks that any answer will incriminate him, he has a right to keep quiet. You can't force him to talk, but he must be physically present. So please, let's get a distinction. It's separate. Attending your trial is separate from saying, come and help the prosecution. He doesn't have the duty to help. No. It's the state that must prove his case. But he has a duty to attend. And for the avoidance of doubt, you go to Article 41, it's repeated there again, that citizens have a duty to uphold the Constitution. So how do you uphold the Constitution if you're running away and embarrassing us as a nation? Look at 41B. Okay, it says, so the exercise, and this is very important. So the general part of 41, it says, the exercise and enjoyment of rights and freedoms is inseparable from the performance of duties and obligations. And accordingly, it shall be the duty of every citizen be to uphold and defend this Constitution. Uphold, that's it, that's the duty. Then you come again. D, to respect the rights, yes, freedoms and legitimate interests of others. You see, respect it, obey. So when the, what do you call it, the state is trying to unravel a matter, the state is investigating a matter in court. When I say investigations, yes, let's be clear. Apart from the police, Yoko, and the rest doing their investigations, the whole court process itself is also another form of investigation.
The court itself too can investigate.
Exactly. So the court is investigating the matter. So
evidence and all.
Very good. The cross-examination, all that is a form of investigation. So a trial is an investigative process as well, right? That's why lawyers were also investigators, right? And the judges. So it says that, so the state is investigating it. And the Constitution says that you must respect, okay, the rights and then the legitimate interests of others. You see? So all of this tied together, Ofori Atta has one unequivocal duty to return to Ghana and to be present. If he comes and then you ask him a question, he keeps quiet, he doesn't mind you like Mumu. Yes, it's within his rights.
I see.
But he cannot stay outside Ghana. And so, please, that should be made very clear. So anybody who tells you he has no duty to come to Ghana, etc., is dead wrong. I'm saying so. That is dead wrong. He hasn't read the Constitution well. He's mixing them. They are different strands of duties. They are different obligations.
But considering how complex you say the entire case is, which you have just run through, how much of an impact will the protest by Arise Ghana we saw this week and the petition, how much of an impact will that have on the complexity that you've just outlined?
Good. It unravels it a bit. It sends a clear signal to the U.S. government that, look, we are now becoming more and more conscious. So we are aware that once he has investments in the U.S., and also if you look at President Trump's record when it comes to investment, business, etc., it's likely at the end of the day they could just delay and not bring him. So, and you know, I had advocated it even before Arise Ghana went in there. Some months ago, I said that in due course, we want to picket at the U.S. Embassy. We want them to understand that ordinary citizens, we understand this, no. It won't be that, oh, yes, we'll bring them. Yes, I've heard the ambassador, good. We respect the comment, etc. But we also know that in the past, you see, I've been referencing Bush 41. That's the older Bush. It's the way to distinguish them sometimes in American speech. The way they talk there is they call the older one 41, then the son 43, right? Because the older one was the 41st president, and then the younger, the son was 43rd. Okay, so Bush 41. When he was campaigning for elections,
Senior Bush.
yes, Senior Bush, he said, read my lips. There will be no increase in taxes. He came and he increased, right? There are many other examples. You see, President Trump, he makes U-turns willy-nilly, right? So yes, we've heard the ambassador, but we too, it's good that we keep raising the issues by doing the picketing, etc., so that it just tells you that we don't want anything to go wrong. We say in Twi that so as the Americans are committing to bring him, we must persistently complain. And there's a lot of value, I like saying, in noise. You see, when you are protesting, they are doing it well for you, but you keep protesting. It makes the person doing it up his game. Okay, what else can I do to make this noise maker shut up? How can I make it better? True. So it's a challenge. So the noise is welcome any day. We can't keep quiet.
Right.
So we have to support Arise Ghana to continue. It helps. It helps so that they also look at how they can quicken their steps in the U.S. to bring him. So that the deportation, when it comes to the ICE case, maybe the ICE case can be dealt with quickly and then it can be deported. Then maybe there won't be the need for us to do the extradition case. Right? And so we also repeat the request that Akufo Addo should step in and the MPP must step in. We gave them the opportunity to serve, right? They had all the privileges, all the benefits, bathing in the skies, etc. And today, what we are getting as payment is international embarrassment. You Google it, and then Ghana is there. We are being embarrassed. We can't continue to take that embarrassment.
Great. Now, Professor Media, you saw this, and in fact, you observed this virtual hearing during the week, and you say, would you agree with those who say Ken Ofori Atta brought this upon himself to just come and end all of this?
Well, first, before I address that, I think the last point made by my very good friend Martin, I've also read a lawyer statement somewhere that is suggesting that, in fact, such demonstrations or protests at the embassy could backfire because it could strengthen the case of Ofori Atta if he so decides to use this as an evidence of the political persecution, and therefore he may not get a fair trial if he comes. So there's a negative side to that public demonstration. Hey, doesn't matter.
That's Congress, people go to picket all the time. We've lived this.
This is an international issue.
Yeah.
It's not an American demonstration at the Congress. But all I'm saying is that that's a view of another
the White House.
And you lawyers have different views
so
anyway.
That's Angela Moore.
Something like that, yeah. I don't know whether it's legal or not, but I think it's an important point to throw in there. Okay. Now, there is no question in my mind, and I've said it publicly, I don't know how many times, that Ofori Atta should come back. In my humble opinion, he may have been ill-advised by those who advised him not to come, if in fact he's been advised at all. And I believe he has lawyers, and I'm sure lawyers are involved in this kind of advice. And, personally, I don't even know how to say it, but there's no reason for him not to come back. Not coming back, unfortunately, has led to this present predicament. I don't believe that if he had come, first of all, his lawyers could negotiate with the prosecutors or whichever office is handling the case about his coming back and the kinds of, whether protection is afraid or whatever. That could have been negotiated. It's done all the time. So there's no reason, no justification for his refusal to come back. So for me, I don't have a problem with that. But I want to shift the conversation a little bit. You see, at the moment, we are focusing on the individual, his responsibilities, and the accountability that he has for the work that he did. And that is in order. However, I think we should also begin to look at this issue in a broader context. Ofori Atta as an individual certainly is responsible for any malfeasance or criminal act connected to his office. But Ofori Atta, as a public officer, did not function in a vacuum.
Sure.
You see, first of all, we should look at the whole system of recruitment into public office. Recruitment in terms of a president, of course, appointing, and what criteria is used in determining appointments.
Perfect.
Look, without necessarily questioning the competence, and this is not only relating to the position of the finance ministry. Of course, Ofori Atta has done very well in private as an investor. Financing, I don't know, maybe through that investment expertise, he was also doing some international financial dealings or arrangements. But not the management of the nation's economy, because the money of the country is not just a matter of collecting and distributing. There's a whole political economy about that. And there's a whole system of how that works.
So you could be successful privately, but...
Precise, but not publicly. And so that raises a question of how we recruit, and this across board, whether authorities appointing people put square pegs in round holes. That's number one. So we have to seriously consider the recruitment of public officers. Secondly, we should be looking at this whole idea of political loyalty. And in his case in particular, maybe the personal protection he felt because his cousin was the president. So here I'm looking at whether that also could be related to all the things he did for which he's being called to account. The third and important thing for me here is institutions that we have and the weaknesses of these institutions and the failure of the institutions to get public officers to behave the way that is required. You see, some of the accusations, they are yet to be established, you know. The SML and other things were sent to Parliament, isn't it?
True.
And Parliament as institution, my good brother is here, Majority Whip. Parliament as an institution approved some of these things. Whether on partisan basis or not, that is not the point. We're talking about the effectiveness of institutions to ensure transparency.
National Cathedral, all of that.
Yes. So it tells me that the weaknesses of our institutions could have been part of the problem. Because I'm looking at the long-term solutions that will not only stop people like Ofori Atta in swindling the country, but for subsequent individuals in public positions to avoid that kind of behavior. So I'm not excusing him, but I'm also pointing out that these are.
So didn't get parliamentary approval. In fact,
I'm saying some of the decisions were policy decisions that were sent to Parliament for discussion and approval. Of course, and all could be part of the problem.
I think the SML, one of the charges was it being done without parliamentary approval.
Exactly.
Yes.
And without PPA approval.
Precisely.
The 28 charges against him.
Exactly.
By the OSP.
Exactly.
Great. So those that got approval we know,
understand.
and others he bypassed Parliament. And of course, we can even ask the question, how could he bypass Parliament if the law required him to submit it to
It's the question I was asking earlier.
Yeah.
That we have too many of those instances where people are managing to bypass Parliament,
That's right.
bypass institutions of
That
state,
is-
and still do things.
That's right.
How do we allow that to continue?
That again reflects the weaknesses in our structures of accountability and transparency. So let's look at that.
Yeah.
So we don't have a recurrence of that. You see, so for me, whether we crucify him or not, or whether we say let the blood flow, as we heard in 1978, after the blood flowed, what happened? Didn't we revert to the same old bad habit of corruption and theft of public assets? It hasn't ended.
It must go beyond.
So
that
I think this could be a wonderful occasion for all of us to consider how best we re-engineer our governance to ensure that the easiness with which public officers are able to do things can be kept. That, for me, is my long-term interest. So sure, Ofori Atta should come and face the consequences of his actions, no doubt. But let's look also beyond that. Because if the focus is on him, you get him and we crucify him and it's gone, have we solved the fundamental issues that enable him, for that matter, that enables any other public officer to steal the people's money and assets? That, for me, I think should be a focus.
It's a very, very important point, you see, and Dr. Zato, this is why I bring you in, because the call for accountability is the reason why there's that unwavering focus and, in fact, the interest in this matter of Kennedy Ofori Atta and what happened in court this week. The demand that come and answer questions that borders on decisions taken during your tenure of office. That is not one to contest, isn't it?
Well, thank you very much. And I want to associate myself with a lot of the things that Prof has said. Actually, if you look at those pictures, the still ones of Ken Ofori Atta, they are very humbling.
You mean the one?
Yes, the ones of him in court.
In the detention
Look at
center.
them. I mean, when you look, they are humbling. And no matter whom you are, be humble. And as we're talking about different forms of accountability, should be a very powerful image to anybody.
This one.
This one, these ones. These should be a very powerful image to any man or woman who today has the power to serve the state.
That's right.
Any man or woman. That no matter how this case finally ends, the fact that you can look at this. Yesterday you saw the man striding along a giant in Ghana in the finance and everything. Today, let me say, being humbled. If this alone does not tell you that there can be one day, nothing else will. Just far away in Tróuble, not over here. So that's the first thing. I wonder that it should be another form of naming and shaming is accountability. Such processes is for accountability. Okay, and so I wonder, let it sip in, watch it, and ask yourself how far we've come or how low we've come. No matter how you decide to read it, the fact should remain that one day, the accountability. Professor says something. And the general idea people try to make is that Ken, whose guilt has not been proven by any court, by whom to public opinion thinks that he's guilty. One of the reasons is because of his close association with President Nana Akufo Addo, former president of the Republic of Ghana. And that is because this idea of family and friends was raised to a crescendo. Made it look like family and friends was what? The one that was leading to corruption. And so it was kind of seen that whatever Ken was doing could get away with it because his cousin was Nana Akufo Addo. Nobody looked at the fact that this was a man who has run one of the financial giants in this country, Chamber of Investment, that was done that. And so it was also then hypothesized that to prevent similar things from future, we should avoid, reduce, or completely eliminate family and friends. Have we done that? Have we removed the family and friends syndrome in Ghanaian politics? No. It's still there in this current government. A lot of family and friends still occupy powerful positions.
But far less.
A lot of powerful family and friends still occupy positions. So what have we learned, or what are we learning from this? We bastardize this, and we bastardize Ken because we believe this. We've not learned anything. We are perpetuating, we are doing exactly the same family and friends things that we said we should do. So as a country, it then begins to ask the question, have we gone or have we not come? That is something that we ought to begin to understand and know that, look, either we come to the terms that families and friends exist, and sometimes they are also active partisan political players. You cannot just somebody because we are family stop your political dreams or ambitions. if we make that the clarion call and not the fact that we should hold you accountable to the same laws, it becomes because if your argument was that Ken was doing this because his cousin was the president, what about all the other family and friends doing that? What are they also doing that we don't know, what I won't see, because their relatives are in powerful positions? What will we see if tomorrow their relatives are not in powerful positions? Then I want to make a point, personally, and I've said this. If I could give him direct counsel, I will say be here tomorrow.
You tell Ken Ofori Atta
Cannot be here to come here tomorrow, face the trial, man up, face the trial, and let the chips fall wherever they may be. That would be my advice, and that's my official position. That because it's going to be, and part of the thing is that it's going to be a drop, take thing that keeps going on, and it doesn't help anybody. But then we come to the actions of the perennial and habitual demonstrators. And it's a legitimate point. If a man's argument is that because of the actions and inactions or otherwise of my stay in office, and because it is hyper-partisan, I will not get a fair trial. Then you turn the TVs and you see men and women at the US Embassy literally calling for his blood. Literally screaming, kill him, crucify him. Then the man can make that argument, and we can all now make that argument. You said it's a ruse, it could be. But then we also know this. That's why lawyers exist on technicalities, right? Because with the technicalities, the law is just poetry. It's just literature. Yeah. Okay. That could be the case. That could be what somebody will hang this whole thing. We told you that this will happen. Look at what they are doing. They're supercharging the whole system. Because the question is, then they're saying that is there any judge who can see these placards, who can see this and free him? That the public anger may be visited on that judge or that judiciary system. When you do that, you are giving people, you may be giving him weapons. And then if those weapons are not successfully used, I'm not saying they should be, I'm not saying they will be, but it's possible that those become weapons, armory, if they are successfully deployed and it doesn't happen, then you begin to do what Martin tries to do. To blame a political party for the actions of an individual. How? I mean, I always say this, I don't know what you gain by doing that. Why?
And you heard Professor Bawumia make the point about Ken Ofori Atta not acting alone.
Yes.
And that he acted as a result of both an appointee within an administration.
Exactly. We said that. And fortunately for us, the other people that he was supposed to arrest, they are already there.
Who are?
No, he was charged with other people, right?
Well, he's just his chief of staff.
Exactly. I agree. No. I mean, all the charges that the SP brought, there are so many people that were so charged.
Yes, that's for SML. SML is one of 5 issues that the OSP is asking questions of him. There's a petroleum and minerals revenue assurance contract. There's the electricity contract termination. That's the cancellation of the ECG agreement with Beijing BX. And then there's the National Cathedral. And then there's SML one.
Yes. So I don't understand. What's the question then?
So, no, you are referencing the fact that there are others that he's being charged with.
Yes.
But this is just specific to just the SML
exactly.
case.
So what I'm saying is that the state can go ahead with, because I don't think all these cases, the state is again that he just acted alone.
No.
So there were other people too. So those people, I don't know whether their trials have begun. Or we are waiting. Or is it
the whole trial? In the US with his aide, Akori, and there's Akori.
So the point I'm trying to make is that, again, the more you try unsuccessfully to make this a partisan case, whenever you accuse his political party, you are making the case a partisan case. The moment you try to bring in the former president, you are making a partisan case. But he's not been tried or he's not been looked for his partisan case. No, he's been looked for one, you were made a minister. There were laws, there were rules and regulations that govern how you should perform those duties. Did you do that? Did you protect and preserve the laws that were given to you, both the letter and the spirit of the law? Did you implement policies, make decisions in the supreme interest of this country? That is what is at stake. Not his association otherwise, because I don't think the MPP did not hold a meeting to say, Ken, you can do this. No, most of the things are done either administrative or a policy. In fact, I don't think you'll be surprised to hear that there are people within his own political party who were against what he was doing. They did. They protested. They wrote letters. The MPP rose up. There were people, MPs, how many MPs? 88 MPs wrote a letter. So whenever you are roping in the party, you are also 98 good.
Eventually, the entire caucus.
Thank you. My point is that then, when you then keep accusing the party, you're also scandalizing them. Because they're like, listen, we actually rose up against this thing to put on record. Today we are referencing that because they were saying that is not whom we are, that's not our party. They are referencing that. So whenever you do that, then they ask you, what did you do when others happened? So my point is, look, let's roll back the partisanship. Roll back the partisanship. Okay. And let's try to deal this case solely based on its merits or otherwise. Right. If you don't do that and we begin and you try to bring in the party, then before you realize, so far you've seen that the whole party, the structures of the party, they've just kept quiet because here's a man fighting for his liberties and freedoms. You have to respect that too. No matter what, he has his fundamental human rights. When you begin to make it a partisan case, when you begin to rope the party in, before you realize the party may realize, oh, look, we are not going to sit down and allow an individual to just keep roping us in. Then the party may then begin to, and before you realize, it becomes the regular or the normal NDC, MPP football. We don't want that. Let's deal with this case just solely on its merits and let the man one day have his day in court and let the court decide what he has to do. Right. And I'm saying this, even if this trial goes, this in delays, and he gets in, and it goes for 10 years, 20 years, 10 years, it comes. No matter the attorney general, the government that is there, if he is found guilty, we should not issue a nolle prosequi.
All right.
We should not. Because I'm saying this, it's important. One of the reasons why you can see the state try to be a little bit of a hurry to prosecute this, because the state is afraid that if it comes at a later date, another attorney general in that office may issue a nolle prosequi as that happened. So let's give and do it quickly. My question is, can we create a system where politicians and big men like this cannot game the nolle prosequi thing in this act? Because you made a point. So now they contribute plenty money, political successes. That is why my argument is, that is why they then get the nolle prosequi. It's because they do that because the Attorney General comes and then they tell you, hey, we gave 10 million, 2 million, 5 million for you to come to power. If we hadn't given the money, you wouldn't be in power. So in return, give us a nolle prosequi. Until we remove the nolle prosequi as an incentive for corruption, until we make it that nolle prosequi doesn't incentivize corruption. If we do not do that, then these things you are talking about will keep happening. You will keep gaming the system.
Thanks for watching. Like and share the video. You can also drop your comment. Please don't forget to subscribe. Click on the bell to turn on the notification.